All right, here we go.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Hockeytown University. Here, you got Zach, myself, with my co-host Leslie, Matt. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
How you doing, buddy?
Another day, freezing cold paradise here in holy Toledo, Ohio.
Hey, man, it's
Swell.
better north of the border.
It's going great. I can't complain. No complaints today. So today, we're going to continue our talk on players of the Red Wings and what we kind of think of them, and kind of going through that midway point of discussing what we think of the team so far. Yesterday, we talked about Dylan Larkin, Tyler Bertuzzi, Andrew Kopp, Michael Rasmussen, Lucas Raymond. All great players. We had some good things. We had some bad things to say. All opinionated, of course. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Let's go ahead and give a brief rundown on David Kopp, or David Perron, who was a free agent signing this offseason, signed 2-year deal, $4.75 million. Kind of brought in to be that power play specialist like he was known to be on St. Louis, Vegas even, and it's worked out pretty well if you ask me. I have no complaints on my end about David Perron. But yeah, I want you to start with that. I want you to kind of tell me what your thoughts are on David Perron so far this season, and I guess just the signing in general, on where you think he stands going into the trade deadline this year, with someone who does have that power play experience, 14 goals, 30 points in 48 games right now.
It's funny when you mentioned that. I totally forgot that he even played for Vegas in the first place. Um, I don't have too many thoughts on him. I think the role that he's played was just kind of like the third, fourth line, like depth scoring. I think he's played that pretty well. I do like what he brings on the power play. Um, I overall have been pretty happy with him. I think we've gotten about what you can expect from him. Um, I also think this may come later, but I think he's going to be a good piece of the trade deadline. A guy like him plays very well in the playoffs every year, so I'm interested to see what they could get from him. But overall, I like the signing. I think it's gone pretty well.
Fun fact about David Perron, for those of you who do not know, the contract that he signed with the Red Wings is the only other team than St. Louis that he has ever signed with in his career. And it's pretty weird to say that, considering that he's played with St. Louis, for majority of his tenure. But in 2013, after that season, he ended up going to Edmonton via trade, who then was traded to Pittsburgh, who then traded to Anaheim Ducks, went back to St. Louis, was taken in the expansion draft by Vegas, went back to St. Louis, and then finally I must have just given up on the team or something and just said, I think I want to take my chances elsewhere. And that's how he landed with us. And we'll gladly take them, and it's kind of weird to say that, but I kind of see him as like an overall team dad. He plays a pretty big role in that sense, and that replaces the Sam Gagne and the Mark Stahl of last year. But even at the age of 34, where he'll be 35 this upcoming year on May 28th, he still does pretty good job at putting up the point production, and he is someone who isn't exactly the fastest skater out there, but his hockey IQ is just insane. I mean, like, he just knows how to get into the right places at the right time, especially on the power play, where he's just got that lethal shot where he could make just about anything happen when you give him the time and space over there in that circle, where we've seen him do it plenty of times so far this season. So yeah, we do kind of live in a world where we did just sign him, yeah, but there's a very good chance that there's a team out there that is lacking that power play experience, that they could really use that David Perron. And that 4.75 really isn't that expensive when you look at it. But if there's a team that really wanted them that bad, that doesn't have that much cap space, we could take on a player that they might not want anymore to replace with Perron, or we could just simply just retain some salary and whatever they exchange us back with, just cool. that helps us out a lot. But I think Perron you could get like a decent haul for, but I could see a real world where we just decide like Perron is too much of an important piece on this team to kind of let go right now. Granted, it was only just a 2-year deal.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what he can fetch at the trade deadline. I think with all of the players I've thought about being Sundquist, who else was I thinking about? Suter and Ernie. I feel like he's probably going to get the best return. I would say if there's a team desperate enough for scoring depth that is going to make the playoffs this year, let's say maybe I think Edmonton could really use him on their third or fourth line for that scoring depth. He could probably fetch as high as a second round pick. I would think a first is a bit of a stretch, but a second seems pretty fair to me. Maybe even a third and a promising prospect. I guess we'll see how his game looks for the remaining month before the trade deadline. Hopefully, you could get something pretty valuable for him.
Now, I kind of like that. We're kind of going off topic talking about that, but you got my head kind of spinning wheels in there, up here thinking about that because I just pulled up their cap friendly profile, and a player that comes to mind real quick is a player like Jesse Puljujarvi, who has been on the rumor mill for what seems like for quite a number of years already, where things just aren't working out for him in Edmonton. I mean, it's pretty apparent this year. Last year, you could have said maybe there's a little change of pace because he did put up the 36 points in 65 games, but it just simply is not working out for him where he's now back to 10 points in 49 games. So maybe that's something that you can include in a deal with Perron, like you said, because Perron does play on that right wing. That's what it says here that Puljujarvi plays. And, you can't get enough power play scoring. But the only thing that I have against that is that Edmonton has always been that team that struggles defensively and goaltending wise. So I think that they would probably lean more towards a player that can help them out in that regard, not so much as a power play, considering that you have two of the top 5 best players in the world in McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But I like where your head's going at with that because that's familiarity to them, right? Like he used to play in Edmonton back in the day, so that could be realistic as well. So I'm not discounting that at all. I think that was a great thought on that.
And that was before Leon and McDavid too, right? When he was playing there, was it before they even had those two?
He played in 2013 till 2015. He was traded in 2015 to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so that's before both of them.
From what it seems like, it looks like it was basically mid-season trade. He played 38 games for Edmonton that year and then played 43 for Pittsburgh. So he was with Pittsburgh majority of the time there. But, yeah, that is before McDavid and that is before Leon Draisaitl. So who knows? They also seem like a team that could probably use a team dad. I don't know. That's something that I guess we could talk about once we get closer to the trade deadline on what kind of teams are interested in a David Perron, which you'd think that a lot of teams are looking for someone that can help them on the power play.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. I mean, it doesn't have to be just restricted to Edmonton. It could be really any team looking to make a playoff push except for, I guess Boston could come knocking, but if I'm going to do a trade with Boston, there's not really much they have to offer in the way of picks and prospects. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think he could help out a lot of teams out there.
Yeah, and just to kind of not to keep talking about it, I just want to throw this out there that he is on pace for 51 points this season in 82 games, and that's pretty much in the middle of where he's kind of been in the last 10 years or so. He's anywhere since 2017, 2016, 17, 46 points in 82 games, 66 and 70, 46 and 57, 60, 71, 58 and 56, 57, 67. And you got him right now, 51 and 82, if he can keep that up. So, and I think that those numbers could go up a little bit more, with this break. The Red Wings got an extra 5 days on top of the break with the All-Star break. So that's really nice. That's kind of what I'm hoping for is that once we come back, we kind of almost come out shooting the gun, kind of like how we do every start of the season where we do good for the first 5 games and then all of a sudden back to reality. Oh, there goes Red.
I knew you were gonna go
So,
there.
oh yeah, I had to pull out the reference,
I
for
mean,
my
hell,
boy.
it's Hockeytown.
So
He
let's
is
go ahead and
Hockeytown.
move on to the next player. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our boy, former St. Louis Blue as well, Robbie Fabry. Robbie Fabry, 27 years old, $4 million cap hit for the next 3 seasons, two after this one. Spent majority of the season injured. He's only played 12 games, 5 points, 4 goals, 1 assist. He looked hot coming out. As soon as he hit the ice playing for the team, he looked really good. It's kind of taking a slow pace now, but that kind of comes with the fact that he hasn't had any kind of training or anything like that. Same as Andrew Kopp, he just missed more time throughout the whole entire season, having to deal with his ACL. Right? It's the
Yep,
ACL.
third time.
Third
I
third
think this
time.
is the same one he tore the previous time. He retore it and then had to get, I think it was reconstructive surgery that he got.
Yes, because the first one was for one ACL, then the second was for the other ACL, then
Right.
this one is now for the second. Like
Yeah.
it's just crazy. The poor guy just can't seem to
His
find a
ACL is
break.
made of paper mache.
But for someone like him, that's a really great story for someone who keeps on being able to come back. I mean, I don't know too many sports athletes that can say that they'd had 3 ACL injuries and then be able to still play in that top sports league, especially hockey, where it's a very grueling sport for a whole 82 game season now. It's only playing half of that, but still, that takes a lot of determination and a lot of hard work to get back onto the ice like that. Um, Talking about Fabry, and I'll kind of start on this, is that it's I don't really have anything to say on him so far this season because that just kind of seems like it would be a little too unfair. They got him pretty much on the third line. Maybe sometimes they'll put him on the fourth line. I can't really remember, but that's what you're going to get out of Robbie Fabry. When we got him, yeah, he was playing in the top six, but adding the Cop, the Perron, and then the Kubalik, and then you have the Lucas Raymond, now you got a Johnny Burgers. So there's definitely been some pushes where he kind of just falls back. But I think he's pretty much happy in general just to be able to freaking play the game of hockey still. So it's pretty much a miracle that he's still able to do that. But like I said, I really don't have anything else to say about Robbie Fabry other than that. And I just kind of hope that he can continue to stay healthy, especially for these next 2 years when we have him. Um, I don't think we trade him. I don't think there's going to be a team that really wants to trade for him. Even if they did, I don't think that return is going to be exactly what we would be hoping for. So I'm just gonna get that out of the window that he's going to be here next year as well. So
Man, this guy is like the Derrick Rose of the NHL. He just keeps tearing ACLs, and he says, I don't need a goddamn ACL. I'll come right back and I'll ball out again. But
I'm
no,
sorry. I just hold on 1 second. Have you? This is really off topic. Have you seen that South Park episode where Kyle wants to play basketball, but he's too small, and then gets all those implants?
yeah, I have. Yep.
That's that's Robbie Fabry with his ACL. He just gets all those pieces put into him so that he's basically robotic and
Yeah,
not
he's
him.
he's got
So,
bionic ACLs right now.
yes,
Yeah.
but continue. I'm sorry.
But no, I think there's not a whole lot to really say about him. We only have what is yeah, a 12 game sample size. He's like just under half a point per game. So, coming back from another ACL surgery where I think he was out almost a year, maybe 10 months. It was the better part of a year. And for him to come back and put up those respectable numbers, that's pretty remarkable. I mean, at some point you keep re-injuring the same area. There's a question of, are you ever going to strap on skates and play the game again? And he just keeps coming back and he keeps producing. As for trading him, I don't really think we should trade him. Because there's not much of a market for an injury-prone forward like him. You're not really going to get much for him. And B, I like his game. I want him to stay. I don't know exactly what his contract is, what the term is on that, but if I don't know if he's on an expiring contract. If you could look it up for me, please.
Fabry?
Yeah.
Fabry still has 2 more seasons after this year.
Okay, so I think after those 2 seasons, so that'll be 2 deadlines from now. If he,
In 2025 is when his contract ends.
okay, so for that deadline, you kind of have to look at him and say, okay, number one, can he stay healthy? And number two, if he stays healthy, can he produce? And if he's been producing at a respectable rate, you may consider re-signing him. I mean, it's so hard to really think about it 2 years into the future because this is going to be a completely different team 2 years in the future. Hopefully, we're going to have those promising prospects that are putting up points now. Hopefully, they're going to take a role with the team. So I don't know. Potentially, you might have a Carter Mazer on that third line who's going to make it tough for Fabry to find a spot on the team still. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I think right now for this deadline this year, I don't think you should move him. I would like to keep him and just see what else he can offer if he stays healthy.
Yeah. One thing I do want to put out there too is that, like you said, looking 2 years into the future, this team's going to look a lot different. Him, Cop, Sherratt, and Billy Huso, and Zadina, if you want to toss him out there, who's injured still. They're the only ones that are signed until that year. So, yeah, we only have 5 players signed for 2024-25. Granted, that's going to change once and when that Larkin extension comes. So that could be any day. That literally could be right now as we speak, and we're just not noticing it.
Hold on, let me look at Twitter. Bear
So,
with me. Bear with me, everybody.
We're very hopeful on this podcast here. So, yeah, fingers crossed that we can get there. But, yeah,
Nope,
2 years from now, yeah, you can't. That's not our job to really think too hard on about it, but that's maybe something we could talk about on a later episode is, the future team and what it could look like. Yeah, Fabry will be 29, 30 years old by the time that contract ends. He's making $4 million now. That kind of puts him in a spot where you're already in your exit window in terms of your ceiling. So whatever you've done for us now and in these next 2 years, Yzerman's going to have a tough thing to do where he's going to have to look at Fabry and be like, currently his best season was 37 points in 72 games, and that was his first season with St. Louis. His best season was was 31 points in 52 games. So the production can be there if he just learns how to stay healthy, and he hasn't been able to play a full season for us whatsoever. So that's another player where you got to look in and be asking yourself, is he going to be more of a liability for us than he would be doing us the production that he can put up while he's on the ice versus how injury prone that he is? So both sides, right? Like I could see where we do and where we don't have him after that contract because we don't know how much he's going to ask for. And do we really want to pay for someone who continuously stays injured? That's the same conversation that we literally just had about Tyler Bertuzzi, where is it worth it to pay someone this X amount of money when they haven't been healthy for you at all in the time that you've had them? So why are you going to expect anything different after you give them that contract? And those are things out of their control. So it's not their fault. That's just how the sport works. So, yeah, I love Fabry. I think he's a great player, but yeah, more to come on that. We'll give it 2 years and see what Yzerman has game planned for this whole entire roster. Let's go to the next player. Let's go ahead and just keep on going down this list. Now let's go ahead and just start off with Pius Suter. Pius Suter, 26 years old. He was signed last season. His cap hit comes in at $3.25 million. Yeah, like I said in the last episode, he was brought in originally to play that 2C that we kind of took off of Chicago Blackhawks' hands. For whatever reason, they just didn't want to qualify him. That was easy decision for Yzerman to make, considering that we wanted players on the cheap and we still have a thing for reclamation projects. So, he put up that first season in 2020-21. He played 55 games, put up 27 points, pretty good. Not the greatest. At that time, he was 25 or 24? 25. So kind of a late bloomer in a sense too, but when we got him, he put up 36 points in 82 games. Not exactly what you expect out of a 2C, but those were some pretty respectable numbers for someone that I would have expected to have started the 3C this year. And that hasn't even happened. He had some opportunities where he did get to get bumped up because of injuries, like when Larkin got injured with his hand, and then, he had to do some line shuffling. But this season, yeah, he's got 12 points in 45 games where he keeps on finding himself. Not as much anymore like he was at the start of the season, but in and out of the roster. But this team doesn't have great center depth, but this is a player where I don't think that the Red Wings are going to keep after the season. He's a UFA. He's going to be 27 this year, like I said, coming up. So, with someone like thinking about, you brought up Marco Casper, that's someone you got to think about, and that's a different topic. But yeah, you got to think about the future of this team where if you can get P.S. Suter to come in on a cheaper contract than that 3.25, cool. But I'm assuming he's going to want term with that. And that's something that we can just take one of our ELC prospects, a.k.a. Marco Casper, and fill that spot. But you also have Michael Rasmussen and you have Joe Veleno. I understand that some people might not want Rasmussen on the center, but that's that option. Michael Rasmussen could be a great 3C for you. Keep Joe Veleno at the 4C. Whatever you want to do, but I just don't think that Suter is really going to stick with this team, and I think that this is a prime player that you could easily say that he could be traded to a team that needs a center depth as well, and you could retain up to 50% of his salary if a team really wanted you to, or take back that piece once again. But the returning price, it's better to get something for him than nothing, even if that is like a 4th or a 3rd round pick. I don't think it's going to be a 3rd round pick, but I'll take a 4th for P.S. Suter, because you have to keep getting something rather than nothing if you're still in the rebuild mode, and you can always do something with those. Use 2 fours to trade up, go and get a 3rd or something, get creative. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think with Pius Suter, I mean, you bring up Marco Casper and the fact that he's an expiring UFA. I really feel like there's not really any reason at all to re-sign him, even for just like a low value. I think you'd much rather just bring Casper in and put him at 3rd, I don't know, maybe 4th line center, and just see what he has. The only reason I would really re-sign him is if Casper doesn't look like he's ready at a training camp and he starts in the AHL and gets, like some North American games under his belt, because he's a European player. He's got to adjust to our smaller ice. That's always a big transition with those players coming over from Europe, those young players. So I think it's probably just, you probably don't need to do anything else other than to just see what you can get for him at the deadline and let him walk. Suter's like really funny to me because he's like one of those players that I'll see score and I'll be like, oh yeah, Pius Suter, he's pretty good, isn't he? And then I won't hear about him for like 15 games. It's really funny. He'll just like score, and I'll be like, oh yeah, he's on the team. That's right.
It's kind of funny that you said that, because I constantly think to myself, whenever Ken and Mickey Redmond say P.S. Suter's name, I'm like, but you don't hear that name every single game. He's kind of like
the Blackhawk. Who's that?
He's kind of like the guy who just kind of skates for free on the team. Doesn't really he'll show up every once in a while. But yeah, I mean,
no, that's Anamorny. Let's be honest, that's Anamorny's role. But I don't see why Suter can't be that too. Most nights he has.
But even to continue on the P.S. Suter, regarding his contract ending and whether if we trade him or not, I personally don't think that he is a candidate that we would re-sign. If we did need more center depth, I think that there are other centers that you can go out and get for cheaper, especially if you want them to play the 4 or 3C. More likely probably the 4C, and I'm not paying the $3.25 million for a 4C. That's just kind of a little much for me. So I think that's kind of where we're going to leave it at with P.S. Suter in that regard. But yeah, let's just keep going down the list. Let's go with Oscar. Sonny Boy Sunquist, where he's 28 years old. He was traded to us in the Nick Leddy deal that got us the Jake Wallman and Oscar Sunquist deal. He comes in at 2.75 mil cap hit, 28 years old. This is someone who was part of the St. Blues cap or cup run as well. Very, very much a depth player. Fourth to third line, depending on what kind of team you're putting him on. I mean, he's a consistent third line player for the Red Wings. This year, he's got 18 points in 39 games, which is pretty good if you ask me for a third line winger. I really didn't have too much expectations of him, considering that his highest point total was 31 points in 74 games. I almost kind of feel like this was the player that St. Louis just kind of like threw into the deal because not because they didn't want him, but I feel like it was either Yzerman just said like, I want an extra player, or St. Louis just said, here, well, can you help us with some cap relief? Yzerman said, sure. So for me, going into the trade deadline, I think that there are teams that would be interested in Oscar Sundqvist. I think that they could utilize him on the power or on the PK. He's a big, big boy. He comes in at 6'3", 209 pounds. So you're getting someone who can play some defense for sure, and that's probably what the team who trades for him is going to want out of him. That's what they're going to ask him to do. I personally, I would trade him if someone came knocking. Once again, that's probably in the 4th to 5th round pick range, especially if you're looking at this year's upcoming draft where it's super deep. Maybe you can convince someone to give you the 24. I think teams are more reluctant to give away their 24s and their 23s because it is so deep, but crazier things have happened. Both were bad.
That's right. And that was definitely a crazy trade.
So, what are your thoughts on Oscar Sundqvist?
Yeah, Sundqvist, to me, he was brought in not only as like a cap relief guy. I think also he was brought in for like, I guess you could say veteran leadership. I mean, he hasn't been in the NHL as long as like, let's say David Perron, but he also was brought in to be like that guy who, I mean, he knows what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. He has that winning pedigree. And I think Yzerman was bringing him in just to say, all right, well, this guy just won a cup a couple of years ago. Hopefully his winning attitude will rub off on the rest of the team and they'll start competing. I like his production for a depth guy. I think he brings really good depth scoring, especially on a team that doesn't have much depth like the Red Wings. I think you said he could get either a 4th or a 5th round pick. It could possibly be a little higher than that, honestly. I think a lot of GMs around the league are going to look at him and not really look only at his point production, but also look at, like I said, he was on the Stanley Cup team, and if there's a contender or just a team in a playoff spot and looking to make a push, they could bring him in and basically just introduce that championship pedigree to the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should just trade Sonny, to be honest with you. I think he would be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to kind of sum it all up. Yeah, to be honest with you, I think that is not a candidate that you're going to kind of keep. I mean, if he doesn't get traded, it's not the worst, right? Like, that's a player that you still need those kinds of players, right? You need the players that play the PK, and you can't just trade everyone off your team. But that is someone that is on my list that if a team came knocking and the offer is right, I'm probably going to listen to that offer. And
I'd be fine either way if he trades or signs, honestly. I'm leaning towards trade because I think you could get a pretty respectable return for him. But if he gets signed short term, I'm okay with that too. I think I just more see him getting traded than re-signed, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it's either the trade or he walks and he gets to finally choose where he gets to go.
It's possible too.
Yeah, So, and if we did re-sign him, I'm sure that's another player that's probably going to be looking for term as well, though. A lot of these players that we have on this roster, that's what they're going to be looking for. And I don't think it's going to be as much as the cap number total. It's definitely going to be the term. I mean, Suter, like I said that for him, Sundqvist as well, and that's going to be Robbie Fabry once he gets to the end of his contract, because they're not going to have that opportunity again to ever get those like 6 to 8 year deals. These are very much like the middle bottom six players that the most that they're probably going to get out of their contract term is probably going to be those 4 years. That's probably the max that those players are ever going to get. And if that's something that they want us to do, I don't know if Steve Yzerman is in the position to keep signing the middle six types of players, and that's something else we can talk about as well. I know I keep on saying it for a later episode, but we're just getting started. We have a lot to talk about, and we're pumped. We're excited. Let's keep it up.
I'm sure you all are pumped too.
Yes.
And if you're not, just pretend that you are. That's all we ask.
So let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and talk about Dominic. No. Did we talk about Kubalik? No, we did not talk about Kubalik.
Well,
so let's go ahead.
Briefly mentioned him. We didn't go in depth to him, but we did. His name came up at some point, and I think it was positive. I hope it was.
Now, yeah, we talked about how essentially some players were brought in to replace other players. So technically saying that Dominic Kubalik was one of those players that come in to basically essentially replace Tyler Bertuzzi if things didn't go the correct way. Now, going off tangent with that, so let's just go ahead and break him down. He's 27 years old, signed this last offseason, comes in at $2.5 million for the next 2 years. This is another player that the Chicago Blackhawks just decided we're not going to qualify him, even though he has given us 30 goals in the season.
Zach, you want to know why they made that decision?
Why?
There's one reason. I bet you can guess what it is. Connor Bedard.
I know. Anything for the tank.
They took an atom bomb to that team and just said, screw it. If we go 0 for 82, let's get Bedard. That's why they did it. It's really not any more complicated than that. They had one goal and that was it.
I mean, if the Alex DeBrincat trade does not describe a full-blown rebuild to you as well, then I don't know what does. Because that was... we're going off topic.
And I mean, you could go on and on. They got rid of anyone with even a shred of talent, not named Kane or Taves.
So Dominic Kubalik, continuing on, his last season in Chicago, last season 21-22, he only put up 32 points in 78 games, and believe it or not, he's already passed that point total this season in just 48 games. He's got 34 points, 14 goals, 20 assists. He already passed his assist total, just one goal away from tying last season. This very much is a player that is going to get over those 20 goals, and I would not be surprised if he got close or got to that 25 goal mark, and that is realistic. And, heading into the trade deadline for a player who comes in at a very cheap cap, who can play either left or right wing, that's very dangerous going into the trade deadline, that you're getting almost a 30 goal scorer for such a cheap cap that if a team came knocking and asked what it would take, I would be salivating and be like, all right, here's now my opportunity to kind of, we got this guy basically for free. We just paid him a little bit, and now we're getting something really great out of it. Not that having Dominic Kubalik isn't great, but that's what we're kind of here still doing. We know that we're still in a rebuild. So, and we talked about this on the last episode, right? That we can't keep missing out on opportunities to trade some of these players. We did that with Mike Green back in the day. I feel like that we kind of did that with Tyler Bertuzzi, not trading him last season. Some of these players, you are going to have that tough decision where, is this going to be the best return that I can get? and you don't even have to think about it even for next year. You just have to think about it right now. Like, is this a good return for me right now? Because if you even wait until next season, what if he gets injured? Then that all just goes totally out the window. You know. Um, Overall, though, I love Dominic Kubalik. I love what he brings to this team. He very much is similar to a David Perron, where he knows how to get a shot off on the power play. He does get some 5-on-5 scoring. He came in really hot at the start of the season. He has cooled off a bit, but that's okay. That's okay. I still think that he can get close to the 60 points for this season as his total. I'm checking right now Elite Prospects to see what he's projected. Yeah, so he's projected 24 goals, 34 assists. That's 58 points in 82 games. That's great for a $2.5 million guy. That's more than what you could have asked for. That's someone who comes in at 2.5. That the PS Suter numbers is what you're gonna get, right? Like, he is overproducing at that level where it would be tough for me to get rid of him. But I also understand that this might be the best time to actually get rid of him if a team came knocking.
Yeah, a guy like this, your first reaction would be you want to sell him high. Um, I really think that so I think he has one more year after this on his contract.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd actually rather lean towards keeping him. Now, the only problem with that is with his next contract. I expect him next year to put up a similar point pace, maybe even a little bit under that. I would expect that his ask is going to definitely be more than 2.5 million if he and his agent have any self-respect and want to earn money in their careers. Um, but yeah, I just read that through the first 17 games of the season, he had 20 points, and now, and do some quick math, he's had 14 points since then. So he has cooled off a little bit, but he is still producing. I really do like him. I think you probably could get a very good return for him. Maybe not necessarily a first, probably get a second for him. Which, I mean, in this draft, a second is still really good. It's a very deep draft, but I don't know. I would lean more towards re-signing him. I want to see what he can do for one more year. And I mean, it's like I said earlier. You never know what the team's going to look like in 2 3 years. We could be looking at a reality where he's a perennial 20-goal scorer and he's a third or fourth line winger, which would be a fantastic problem to have. So I don't know. I would lean more towards re-signing him, even if it's going to cost you a little bit more money.
I kind of agree with you on that, and I definitely would sign him to an extension. And you're right, it would come in higher than that 2.5, and that's quite all right with me. And that's where
Might be around 5, 4.5, maybe 5.
Now, if you had both of these players where it's Tyler Bertuzzi, and I know that obviously their contracts aren't aligning at the same time where they end, but if you had a Tyler Bertuzzi and a Dominic Kubalik right next to you both, and they both told you that they wanted the same exact number in the same exact term, I think I'm going to lean more towards Dominic Kubalik and
That's not a
take
hard
him.
decision there. Yeah, it's not a hard decision. And the number one factor separating them is availability. Dominic Kubalik, barring any injury, which I pray to God doesn't happen this season, he's expected to play all the games, and Bertuzzi's not even played 20. So it's like if Tyler's coming to you and he's saying, hey, I want to be signed for whatever it is, 4 or 5 years, you're going to say, okay, well, I have Kubalik. He does the exact same thing you do, except he actually does it for a full season and he wants the same thing. Why would I give out two of those contracts when one will do me just fine?
Now, that isn't, yeah, no, I agree with you. That isn't me saying that I think that they are similar players and that they do the exact same thing
Well,
on
no,
the
they
ice.
don't do the exact same, but if you're in a scenario where
Yeah.
you have to pick one or the other, I know which one I would pick.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that you can game plan around. And you brought up a Carter Mazer who kind of plays like that role that like Tyler Bertuzzi does. So maybe within that, after next season, if Carter Mazer is there, then maybe you could eventually just bring him up. That is something that is realistic, but I don't want to go too deep into that kind of conversation.
Yeah, our prospects are for another discussion entirely, which
Yeah, we keep bringing them up
we could fill
and
up
we keep
three
saying that.
hours with that. So there's a
Yeah, we
lot to
keep
be
bringing
excited
them
about there.
up. But yeah, Dominic Kubalik, yeah, he's having a terrific season. I think that was a very great signing by Steve Yzerman, and he's a player where I'm pretty much okay with all the above. If we resign him, after next season, we resign him. If we trade him in this trade deadline, we trade him. Cool. As long as the returns are right. Uh, it, you know, or this offseason, he could get traded this offseason if we decide that, we need to make some changes in that regard. But firmly, I do believe that he is a candidate where we could keep him on for a little bit longer. The only issue to me is that it's the age, right? Like he's 27, so he'll be 29 by the time that contract ends, and same as all the other guys. These guys are going to be looking for these long contracts because they haven't had them and they want them. They don't want to keep getting these 1 to 2 year deals where they keep on jumping around from place to place. Some people are journeymen, but it's not the lifestyle for everyone, and I can understand why. It's got to be tough on some people. Look at Hellberg; he's been to 5 different teams so far this season. That poor guy.
That's just because he's not very good.
Yeah,
I mean, look at the Arizona game, and you tell me that that's an NHL caliber goaltender.
And that probably would have let in at least 5 more goals, buddy. But that's
we don't know because it didn't happen.
We'll talk about those guys here pretty soon. So yeah, let's just move on from Dominic Kubalik. Let's go on to your boy Adam Ernie, the sharpshooter of the Detroit Red Wings.
Elite goal scorer Adam Ernie.
This is a guy that Steve Yzerman traded for. He traded a 4th-round pick, I believe, to acquire Adam Ernie, who simply just could not find his way into the Tampa Bay Lightning system. And for good reason. That team is just freaking stacked. They don't need an Adam Ernie on their team. So he's 27, comes in at 2.1 mil. I can't remember if it was a 2-year deal. I think it was a little bit of an overpay, but at the time we needed bodies and we have to meet a cap floor, so I see why it happened. But he's been with us this is his 4th season with us. Jesus, I did not even realize that. It doesn't even seem like he's been on the team for that long. But within these seasons, I mean, the first season with us, 56 games, 5 points. Second season, 20 points, 45 games. Last season, 19.79 games. This season, doing a little bit better, 14 and 43. Okay, I guess I didn't really realize that, but still, I don't. You easily could just take Adam. I was gonna mix Adam Ernie with Elmer Soderblom. Elmer Soderblom easily could just come in and fill that spot for Adam Ernie. So there's your guy who comes in on cheap, just as big, probably just as skilled, if not better. We really don't need Adam Ernie. I don't think he's a player that is going to be coming back after this season. Being 28 years old, and there might be a team that's interested in him, but I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm expecting what we sent for him to come back. I think that would be kind of wrong of me, but I do think that is possible to kind of get a 4th-round pick for a team that needs that scoring depth still. Like, he can play on the PK. He could play on the power play if you really needed him to. And he plays a hard-nosed game. He gets under people's skin. He knows how to forecheck, and he knows how to go to the net. He's a decent player, but I don't think that there's much room on this roster for him after the season. And I think he's on his way out, but there have been plenty of times this season and even all the other seasons where I'm just like, when did we let Darren Helm change his name to Adam Ernie? It's like Darren Helm.
I'd rather have Darren Helm.
I probably would rather have Darren Helm too. Yeah, personally, I'm going to put it out there. Adam Ernie kind of needs to go to an island and just kind of stay there. No offense. I love all Red Wings players, but some of them I can deal without. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Adam Ernie?
All right, so with Adam Ernie, obviously when he had those higher point production years with the team, that was when the team was all the way in the dumpster, and you could have put me on the team. I would have got maybe 10 points. It was that bad. So
yeah, he was
I can't even time my skates.
with Larkin.
Yeah. So what he would bring to really any playoff caliber team, he's not going to bring much scoring. I mean, he might score here and there. I mean, he's an NHL player. Of course, he's going to score occasionally, but really all he brings is forechecking and just I mean, he's a gritty depth player. I I don't know. I mean, that's pretty much all he brings to the Red Wings right now is gritty depth player forechecking. The only problem is we don't need any of that. We need goal scorers, and that is not what his forte is. So yeah, I think you probably could get a similar return like what we got for him when we traded for him, maybe a fourth round pick. Um, there's really no reason to bring him back. You might as well just bring, like you said, Soder blow him up, or I also mentioned Mazer earlier. Maybe he could fill that role that Anna Murray is playing right now. It's just only a question of when that'll happen. But yeah, ship him for whatever you can get. It'll be something. It won't be much, but it'll be something.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So let's go ahead and talk about one of our last forwards. We'll still have another one to talk about who's on injured reserve and should be coming back here actually once the All-Star break here ends. But let's go ahead and talk about Joe Veleno, another young guy that we have on the team. He's only 23 years old, still an RFA. He comes in just under $900,000, which we love. We can't get enough of those types of contracts. We need more of those young players to keep coming up and getting those ELCs on for us so that way we can start going after some bigger name guys if we have to, or signing players like Larkin, Raymond, and Sider down the line. But yeah, I mean, he started off in 2020, 21. He played 5 games. He got 1 point, 1 goal. That was great. You know, last season was pretty much close to his full season, other than this year where he pretty much now is full time. But last season he put up 15 points in 66 games. You know, that's kind of what I expected out of someone for their first year in the NHL. This is another player that's kind of similar to Rasmussen, who the only reason that we ever ended up with Joe Veleno is because we traded Thomas Tatar to Vegas Golden Knights, and that's the pick that it ended up being was the 30th pick was Joe Veleno. And I remember when that draft happened where George and I were actually at the library and he comes running up to me. He's like, "We drafted Joe Veleno." And I was like, "What?" Yeah. Okay, cool. So that was pretty hype, you know, and you know, this was a player who originally had exceptional status, you know, so he was able to play in the queue at the age of, I think it's like 15 or 16. So they get the exceptional status to get a head start in the league. And everyone thought that he was going to be some sort of like this really great phenom player. And granted, he did do good in his last year in the queue where he put up 104 points in 59 games where he put up 42 goals. So that's there. That is there. That goal scoring and that playmaking is there.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I would too. It is starting to come around. I mean, he's about to tie that point total from last season, and he is doing it with 19 less games. I mean, he's got 14 points right now and 47, like I said. This is a good example of a player where you just got to keep telling yourself, and this is probably what Eisman is probably saying, that you have to be patient on a player like this, where this just might be his type of managing coaching style where you got to let him figure it out on his own pace, and then once he does, he's going to bloom and blossom into the beautiful flower that we wanted him to be, where there's a good chance where he might be that, you know, low tier 2C, high end 3C. You can't get enough of those guys, and it's good that we have players like that. Do I want him to be a 2C? Of course. Is that realistic? Sure. Is it going to happen? I don't know.
Is it
I'm not
realistic though? Is it realistic? With this
based on
team, I
his
don't think
history.
so.
Based on his history, I think it is kind of realistic. I don't think that he's going to be an 80-point guy, but I do think that he could potentially be a 60-point guy for sure. I don't think that that's unrealistic at all. You know, like I said, he put up that 104 points in the queue. Granted, that's not the NHL, but he is someone you can definitely tell who really has been working on his defensive game. And I think he really wants to be that two-way 200-foot game player, kind of like a Larkin mold-esque, where he's that Larkin light almost. And you can tell like he has gained a lot of speed. He's gotten faster. He has gotten bigger. Last year there was that meme going around where they were calling him Swoleno because of how jacked the guy is. I mean, the guy's yeah. You look at pictures of him and you're like, this guy is ripped.
He's a
Like,
stud bucket.
yeah. I mean,
He
6
really
foot one,
is.
100 pounds. He's a pretty sturdy boy, so I'm not too worried about him in that regard. But I like his game overall. You know, he's good with the puck. Him and Johnny Burgers look fantastic together. And I think that if you put Soderblom on that line, if you wanted to call that the fourth line, and that's something that could happen after the trade deadline where you put all three of those on the line. And or Volnano's played in Sweden, so it's not like there wouldn't be a connection there. They all played in Sweden at one point, so they do have a connection where they can build off of something like that and kind of come up with their own style of play where it's the Swedes against the NHL type of deal. We can call it the Swede line if we really wanted to get creative, but that's unoriginal. Don't listen to me. I'm not funny at all. So,
Funny
yeah,
looking.
personally, I like Veleno. I think that this is a player that you definitely have to sign. Maybe you. I don't think that there's going to be teams calling for him, but I do think that there would be teams calling for him that could include him into a package deal. I think that that's as far as it goes, but I don't think that the Red Wings are in a position to really trade off any centerpieces because they need that depth.
Yeah, I think with Veleno, he's like a wait and see player. I think where he is right now in the 4C role, that's not his ceiling, but I also kind of feel like it's not super far off. Um, I think as this team gets more center depth, I wouldn't really be surprised to see him move to the wing and might maybe either play on the second or third line. I think he'd be a pretty good winger. I mean, I don't think his game would suffer at all for being moved to the wing. And it's like you said, he is still a pretty prominent trade piece. Obviously, you're not going to want to trade him straight up. Like if we were to go through with the Horvat deal, he most likely would have been one of the pieces involved with that deal because you saw what the Islanders got. I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar for
That,
us.
that definitely would have been the Ratu
Yeah,
piece for sure. He would have been the Ratu.
probably.
So
Yeah, yeah. You're not far off with that. Um, but that's going a bit off topic. No, I do like him. On his next contract, I don't expect him to really be earning that much. Maybe 2.5 or 3 mil. I don't really know what that contract would look like. We, very clearly have much bigger contracts ahead of him to figure out. So it's almost kind of funny to like even be thinking about that at this point. But I do like what he brings to the team. I think he's only going to get better. I mean, we've seen that he's only getting better. So he's a very promising young player. I can't wait to see what the future holds for him. I kind of have a hot take between him and Rasmussen that a lot of people are probably not going to like. I think if you were to pick one of those players to come out and be a 50, 60 point guy, it would be Veleno. I guess that's not really a hot take because we know what Rasmussen is at this point, but I'd say out of our young players, he's one of the most promising. I think he's going to be a very solid NHL player when he hits his prime.
yeah, all around, Veleno still very much is kind of that raw material of a prospect that you see from time to time, as most prospects are actually. But yeah, he's starting to round out into his own kind of game. Like I said, it almost kind of reminds me of he kind of reminds me of a little bit of a Larkin with his speed and the way that he handles the puck sometimes. And granted, I'm not saying that he's going to be a Dylan Larkin, but the hope is there, right? Like, and that's all we can do is just kind of hope that he hits a ceiling and kind of goes beyond that. But yeah, there's plenty more time to come on that. Like I said, he's only 23 years old, and yeah, that contract's going to come in pretty light considering that Michael Rasmussen's the same age and he makes 1.46. So it could be right around there. It could be right under 2 mil. Who knows? So it'll probably be like a 2 or 3 year deal for sure. That's it for the forwards. We can talk about Philip Zadina, but I kind of feel like that's a little unfair to do for him,
We don't
considering
need
that
to.
he only played a couple games. Like I said, he's
0 points.
bound to come back here, hopefully after the All-Star break.
I hope
The only
he
thing
can
I have
come back and produce, but
that's
I
what
don't
I
know.
was gonna say. Is that's my only thing that I have to say for Philip Zadina is that this was my golden boy when we drafted him, where I was super excited and super pumped for him, and that I just hope that he figures it out and just kind of turns it around. The production comes his way. I think it's still. I do think that's still there. I do think that he can still be a 15 to 20 goal guy at the least. Um, and there's you need those. You do need those types of players.
You need them,
Moving.
but when we were drafting Zadina. So before I say this, I'm just going to get out of the way. I was a Quinn Hughes guy. I was banging the table for him even when Zadina fell to them. When they
I
picked
think we
Zadina,
all were.
so when they picked Zadina, I understood it. I was like, okay, we didn't think he'd be here. I can't say it's the wrong pick, but my God, I would have rather had Quinn Hughes. And that's not only just revisionist history, that's what I actually thought back then. But um, you, you say he could be a 15 to 20 goal guy. That I guess that's fine. You didn't draft him to be a 15, 20 goal guy. You drafted him to be a 30, 40 goal guy. So if he only does 15 to 20 goals, that's great, but that's still a disappointment. That's not what he thought we'd be. So I don't know. I don't have much thoughts on him. He's literally done nothing. I mean, he's like the only player besides Bertuzzi who's done less. I mean, I don't know much to say about him. I hope he can come back and produce. I'm not holding my breath that he will. I'm not expecting he will. But I do hope that that can happen.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All the best of luck to him, and hopefully he can figure out whatever's going on with him, where the pucks aren't going into the net like he said on draft night. But that's it for the forwards. Let's go ahead and run a quick one on some of these defensemen. Let's just go ahead and start with the best defenseman of them all, Ben Sherratt, who is just signed this offseason at $4.75 million, who's already 31. So a lot of you are probably saying and thinking, why are you doing that? Well, we did kind of sort of need a team dad on defense, replacing Mark Stahl. So I get that. And you do want someone on that back end to kind of be that feisty hot tamale kind of guy who gets in the people's face when they're doing it to your players too, right? Like you want to have someone to help out the Mo Sider, the Lucas Raymonds, the Burgers, the Velenos. Um, so he definitely isn't what I expected when we signed him. When we signed him, the only knowledge that I really had of Ben Sherratt was that he played with Montreal, went to the Cup, lost the Cup. The following year, went to Florida, traded for a first round pick, and then Florida gets knocked out. That was the extent that I knew about Ben Sherratt. Twitter let me know real quick on what we were going to expect out of Ben Sherratt, and my God, it's way worse than what they were saying in my own opinion, to be honest with
Somehow.
you. It's just, like I didn't quite see it at first. I kind of said like, no, this is the kind of guy that I think we needed. He is what we were hoping Giovanni Smith was going to be. That never did. But yeah, as time went on, I just kept on realizing that like this guy just doesn't know how to like stick to one spot and kind of like stay there. Like he's just kind of all over the ice, right? Like I like the forechecking and I like the pressure, but he takes himself out of the play too many times and kind of leaves people out to dry, and that really hurts the team. And that's why he's gone from being on the top pairing to now being on the second pairing, where a lot of the fans are calling for him to just go on the third pairing, and we
Me
get it.
included. I'm one of those fans.
I'm one of those fans too, and I get it that you don't want a third pairing guy making $4.75 million, but that's business.
It is what it
That's
is at this point. I mean, You can't go back and change the contract and just be like, okay, well now that you're on the third pairing, we're only going to give you $1.5 million. It's like you just can't do that. It's so I'm the contract never looked good from the beginning. I think we all pretty much knew what we were going to be getting in Ben Sherratt, and it's actually kind of been slightly worse than what we thought we were getting, but still more of the same. Um, I think with his game, like you said, he's a very good forechecker. I actually think when the team is in the offensive zone and he has the puck on his stick at the blue line, that is where he shines. That is like his
Yeah.
best part of his game is being in that whole like sitting at the blue line and kind of just driving play from there. When he does anything else, I want to throw my TV remote through the TV because it's just like I don't know. I mean, I get that his physicality is something that was really needed on this team, but my God, this guy was born without hockey IQ. It's crazy. It's like whoever he gets paired with, they're gonna take the brunt of the responsibility in defensive zone because he's going to try and kill someone who has a puck on their stick and he's blown an assignment. And against all these teams in the NHL with so much skill in the lineup, you just can't blow an assignment because teams will make you pay for that 95% of the time. So just with the contract, it is what it is. I don't think in the long run his cap hit is going to hit the team really that hard while they're competing for the playoffs because we're probably still a good 2 or 3 years out from that anyways. Um, but yeah, there's not much else to say about Sherrod that hasn't already been said. He's a third pairing guy, and for whatever reason, GMs are in love with the guy. He got a first of last year's deadline. I don't know how the hell Montreal swung that, but he does bring physicality to the team. I just wish at that cap hit he brought a little more defensively.
It's just pretty crazy to think that we haven't even had him for a full year. And once he signed that contract, it automatically became the worst contract on this team,
Yeah,
on this roster.
from day one, literally from day
And
one.
we have him for 3 more seasons after
Yeah,
that. So it's like
and that's
it's
still not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world that we have him for
no
3 more years. This is not
right.
like a lot of fans out there. I understand that it's a bad contract. I've been saying that till I'm blue in the face. It's not the Seth Jones contract. It's not the OEL contract. It's not an anchor. It's not a good contract, but it's not a total anchor too. And I've
Right.
also said this to you before. If they really decide to move on from him, which is probably looking like a good idea, that's a movable contract. I don't know if you're going to move it without a little bit of salary retained, but you can move that contract. I think teams, not many teams are out there that want him, but there are teams out there that could use him. And if you get a call for him at this deadline, go ahead and ship him. Even if it's for like half salary retained, that's still a good deal. You got to ship him. You might get a pretty good return. I mean, his offensive numbers are not terrible. He's actually looked pretty good in the offensive zone, like I said. So
Mhm.
I think you could get some value for him, and you get most of that contract taken off. That's a win-win.
Yeah. I don't, as much as I would love to move on from him and kind of trade him to someone else, um, I don't think it's a good idea to do a contract buyout. That's going to double um,
No, I don't want that
the
either.
length of how long you got to buy him out for. So if he's got 3 more years left, you double that. That's 6 years that you got to pay him out for. Um, as far as a trade goes, I don't think it will be this season. I don't think it
Probably
would
not.
be next season. I think it would be when he has 2 or 1 year left on his contract.
Yeah, that
Um,
that seems likely.
and even then, if you wanted to retain some, you can go ahead. If the team really needs you to do that, go ahead or take back a piece, whatever it is. But I think once once his contract gets to ending, that might be when Detroit actually is starting to make pushes for the playoffs. And once that time comes, this roster is going to be full of young talent. So it might not be that bad of an idea to keep a Ben Sherrod on your team who is going to stick up for those players, like I said, he currently does now. So we need players like that. We're not asking Moritz Seider to do that either because
But he still does do
why
that
are we
because
gonna?
he's a monster.
it just doesn't really make sense to kind of. We don't have any other players that really do that. So I do see a world where we let Sherratt just write out his whole entire contract. And I don't think that there would really be anything wrong with that. But like I said, I think until he proves us otherwise, I think you have to stick him on the third pair going forward into the season because he's not only made Moritz Seider look bad, but he's made Filip Hronek look bad too. Filip Hronek is who we're going to talk about next. That guy was off the handle. His handlebar mustache.
Literally off the handle, yeah.
Literally off
honestly,
the handle.
It has to do with being with Sherratt impacting his totals. It also has to do with that beautiful stash being gone. I don't know who on the team told him to shave that, but they should be fired into the sun. Like, that was just immediately when he grew that, he became a whole other player. Yeah, so I guess let's just go right into Hronek. He's like the top candidate for most surprising player on this team. I mean, we were talking about last year that we didn't even really want to see him on the team anymore, and if he was going to stay on the team, it would probably be in a third pairing depth defenseman role. And all of a sudden, he's burst on the scene, and he's looked like a totally different player. And he's pretty much exactly what this team has needed in a defenseman. He can produce points. He's a big presence at the blue line. Maybe his defensive game still leaves a little bit to be desired, but when you're producing that much point wise, that's always going to happen for a defenseman. But yeah, I really liked what I've seen from him. I mean, I picked him up in fantasy, and that's been a good decision until he got paired with Sherratt. Thanks a lot for that, Ben. So yeah, no, I've really liked what I've seen from him. Um, I don't know what his point total is at right now, but I think he can get pretty close to 60 points.
Yeah, he's at 33 right now in the
Yeah, so he could
48
get there.
games. Yeah, I'm pretty
At least
sure
close.
he's on pace to be just under 60. And I
Yeah.
said it's 56 and 82 games, so he's on pace to at least
Okay.
play a full
That's
season,
very
which
good.
is great. Which is great because we haven't had a full season of Filip Hronek either. This team is I'm kind of seeing a trend where, yeah, we have a lot of players where I know it's hockey. It's a professional sport. You're playing against full grown men that are 200 pounds plus. There's going to be injuries, but we have a lot of players that have not played full seasons. And I look at my two golden children, Raymond and Seider, who are going into their second season. This will be their second season where they played a full 82 games. These are the types of players that we need. So, let me kind of temper my myself here a little bit and kind of talk a little bit more about Filip Hronek. 25. He's got 7 goals, 26 assists in the 48 games, 33 points. He is someone who is, yeah, I'll say it right now. I was the one who wanted him off the team last year. I thought that we missed our opportunity to trade him. I always kind of considered the fact that he is very much the Mantha material that he just does not fill this rebuild right now. And I still kind of believe that. And this touches back on the topic that I said before, that we need to stop missing on these open window opportunities to ship these players off when we know that we can get the most out of them, especially right now for someone like Filip Hronek, who is on pace for the points I said he was, currently makes $4.4 million for 3 years. He has one more year left after this contract. And being the right shooting D that he is, I mean, the most points he's put up in the season was 38. He put up 5 goals, 33 assists. He's almost gotten to 10 goals in the season. He very may well do that this season, where he's got 7 of them right now. And every team in the NHL always needs a right shooting defenseman. And it's weird that I'm kind of saying this, because that was kind of one of the Red Wings' longest problems, was that we didn't have a right shooting defenseman until Mike Green came along. So it's kind of hard to say all of this, but at the same token, yeah, I think now might be the time where we might have to settle on moving on with Filip Hronek, because this might be his ceiling. And personally, I do think that this season would be his ceiling. I don't think that he can be that consistent 60-point guy. Maybe not on our team. Maybe he could be on a different team. But it's definitely not helping the case if we're hooking him up with Ben Sherratt. And I do firmly believe that if you're going into the trade deadline with an RFA who makes $4.4 million going into next season, you can get a lot for that. Even if you wanted to retain some salary, you're not only giving them a right shooting defenseman, you're giving them a right shooting defenseman that you have the ability to have the talks with and sign that long-term extension without the fear of him walking. So that's a plus if you did decide that you wanted to move on from him. But Phil Peronic, it kind of scares me that there's a chance that this guy is going to ask for the $7 to $8 million when that time comes. And that's partially another reason why I am okay with moving on with Peronic either this season or next season. Because that's money that we have to give to Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin, and whatever other players you want to insert there, And I get it that opens up a spot that you now need to fill. But I do think that there might be a right-handed defenseman out there in free agency that you can bring in to kind of fill that spot. That might come in at the same cap hit or for lesser, and that's okay if that's a stopgap that you want to fill up real quick until you can find something in the draft. But that's a real big spot on our prospect pool that we don't have is the right shooting D. So it'll be interesting to see what Steve Yzerman and company want to do with him. But I think for Philip Peronic, really great player, and he's having a resurgence year. He is looking really good, and I hope he continues it. But Lalone needs to get him off of that line with Sherratt. It's just absolutely destroying.
Yeah, he needs to just send him down. And I hear what you're saying with you want to sell high on Philip Peronic while you still have him. And, I would agree with you if this were 1920 or the 2021 season, he was putting up this point total. I'd say, heck yeah, ship him off whatever you can get. We need all the future assets we can get. I kind of feel like at this stage in the rebuild where you're every season expected to push a little further down the road and get closer to that playoff berth and be that playoff team, I feel like you can't really do that without Philip Peronic. I feel like he's a very big part of our future. I mean, he's going to be a big future, probably going to be a top 4D for a good amount of time. I mean, we'll see how long that's going to ultimately end up being, whether it's 5, 6, 7 years. But yeah, I'm more in the camp of re-signing Hronik. I think when you say he's going to be asking for 7 to 8, if this is his ceiling, I don't really see him getting that much or really even asking for that much. Where I think he kind of caps out at is just under 6, maybe 5.5. And what you say if Raymond and Seider, you do have to sign them. I mean, they're going to be coming off their ELCs and then they'll be restricted after that, won't they? Restricted free agents.
Raymond and Seider?
Yeah, they'll be restricted, won't they? Coming off of those deals.
Yeah. They'll still be restricted free agents.
Yeah, so
however,
those would be cost controlled
whatever
assets.
Length of contract that you give them.
Yeah. So they're going to be more cost controlled versus like Larkin, where he's going to be a pending UFA, and of course he's going to have more leverage being that because you don't want him to walk for nothing. So you can have a little bit more control in what you want to pay Raymond and Seider. That being said, you should definitely pay them what they're worth. But no, I don't want to move on from Philip Peronic just yet. I think he's a very big piece of this team. I really do think it would be a mistake to move on from him, even if you could get a lot in return for him. That's just my 2 cents. We'll see what happens.
No, for sure. And, that's part of me thinking, too, that, you're right in that sense where he very may well could be an important piece to this team because, like I said, those right-handed D are very hard to come by. They're not just everywhere falling off of apple trees in the NHL,
They certainly are not. When you get a solid one, you really do kind of have to hold on to him.
The issue
if you want him to do anything.
The issue with me, like I said, is worrying about the cap hit and what he's going to want. I don't know if there's a world where we feel comfortable where we're paying two right-handed defensemen each 8 or 7 mil, and that's probably where they're both going to want to end up, and that's something that worries me. But let's we're kind of running overtime, so let's just kind of go through some of these other ones. Ole Mata, 28 years old, signed to a 1-year deal this year, $2.25 million. Paired up with Philip Hronek to let Hronek be that offensive defenseman that he's supposed to be, and Ole Mata being that stay-at-home defenseman with, he has the cup experience playing with a bunch of teams in the league already. He just came from, I believe it was the Los Angeles Kings that
Yeah, it
he played
was.
for
That was his
before
last team.
this season. Yeah, then he played with Chicago and Pittsburgh too. So he's gotten a cup
Twice.
for. Yep, he's gotten it twice actually. You're right. Yep. So he's got that on his resume, and that's another kind of like a team dad. Even though he's only 28 years old, he's been around the block a couple times. So that's information that you're instilling into this young core still, right? Like that's something that we keep, or at least I keep on bringing up, is like this is very important that I think Yzerman really wanted to do is kind of teach this younger group the importance of being ready all year round, staying healthy, eating right, and then preparing for the playoffs, even if you don't think that, or if you're just not in the spot right then and there, just being prepared for whatever happens, that you have to keep pushing, especially towards the end of the season. So I love Ole Mata. I love what he's done for the team, and he's put up, pretty sure he's already passed his point total that he did from last season, which is great to see. He's came out hot once again. Yeah, last season he put up 8 points, and so far he's put up 15 in this year in 44 games. Last year it was in 66. So he's someone who I believe is either going to get traded or we're going to extend him. It's going to be either one. I don't think we let someone like this just walk for nothing. And personally, I think I am more on the trade side, and I would rather extend Jake Wallman. I think Jake Wallman would come in at a cheaper deal, and probably for less term rather than Ole Mata. That's another player that's he's 28, about to be 29 probably, and that's another player that probably wants a long-term deal, and that's something that I don't think I'm comfortable doing with these players that are entering out of their prime. I keep on saying this, and like I don't think I can make it more apparent than what it is. Like it's just it is what it is to me personally, and I think other people probably feel the same way as well, that like we can't. I feel like that would be putting us in the New York Islanders position where they kept on signing all these players like in their prime, but like on the back end of their prime. And now they're stuck with basically nothing and going out for a Bo Horvat. I don't want that to be us 3 years from now, because that's what it would be like if we signed all these players that are on the last year of their deal or have one more year, But yeah, I went on a little bit about that, but yeah, go ahead and tell me what you thought about Ole Mata so far this season.
Man, you said more about Ole Mata than I think any GM or NHL insider's ever said in his career. That was that was a masterwork by you.
I'm
Um,
a I'm a defensive first kind of guy. I love
I
a
can
player who
tell.
knows how to play good defense.
Yeah, but I like Ole Mata. He's another one of those surprising signings where it's very short term and we didn't really know what we were going to get with him, and it's definitely exceeded expectations. I think when you bring up Jake Wallman needing to be re-signed, I'd say that's a priority over re-signing someone like Mata because Jake Wallman is slightly younger. I think his ceiling is higher than Mata. I would ideally like to see. I guess I'd like to see Wallman sign. You can choose between one of the two. You don't really have to choose both. So that being said, I would like to see him get shipped at the deadline. He's gonna get, with his point production plus his defensive numbers this year. If you would have asked me before this season, what is he going to get at the deadline if you want to trade him? I'd say, oh, I don't know, maybe a fifth round pick, fourth round. You could probably get a third rounder for him. Uh, you definitely could. I think a lot of these. ideas by me are like pie in the sky, though. This probably is not going to happen. But yeah,
We're
he's a pretty
definitely
good.
not experts in that regard. So just so
That's
that
why we
everyone
sit
knows,
on a
these are just
podcast twice a week, and we're not in an NHL GM's office. That would probably be why. But yeah, I like what he's brought. He's definitely helped out with Hronek's game. He's a big part of why Hronek is having this breakout season that he is having. Um, I guess that's just a long way for me to say I would like to trade him because I think you can sell high on him, and he's definitely been very promising this year.
I do see it realistic turnout where you could get a second even for Ole Mata. Like he has that playoff
It's
experience.
possible.
He has
Yeah.
cup experience. I don't think that that's like considering that we got a second back for Nick Leddy and Ole Mata looks better than Nick Leddy did for us right now. Yeah, I think that second is doable. I really do, especially at the trade deadline. Teams need that depth defense. He plays the PK. He knows how to defend. He knows how to be that stay home guy. And that's what you need in the playoffs is those people who are sound defensively, know what they're supposed to do, and get it done. And that is someone that I know that can get it done. Like I said, if we can get a second with two players for Nick Leddy, we can get that for Ole Mata. I think it's there. And that cap hit definitely does help out a lot more than the Nick Leddy trade did. So yeah, Ole Mata at 2.25 once again. So we talked about Jake Wallman a little bit. Yeah, I think I recently, of all people in the last couple of weeks, have definitely jumped on the Jake Wallman hype train.
I'd say most of
Someone
us have.
someone mentioned about a month ago, they're like, who says no to a Jake Wallman 4x4? And I said, well, I'll raise you a 2x2. And he says, I understand you're a little concerned, but I promise you, you might not be disappointed once you see what he can do. And honestly, that person kind of made me eat my words a little bit. Yeah, I'm very impressed with what Jake Wallman has done. I mean, at the age of 26, he's a late bloomer, but a lot of people will say that's because there was a logjam in St. Louis on defense, which it's true. They were always kind of a defense first type of team. He's never played a full season. This is currently, well, I lied, or I didn't lie. I was about to lie, but yeah, he played 51 games last season. That was the most he ever played in a season in the NHL. So that means he's probably going to break that. But he was injured at the start of the season too, so it's taking him time to get adjusted, and it did. And it's starting to show that he is legit. I mean, he's a plus. I know plus minus is not the greatest stat to go off of, but he's a plus 13 right now. He's on a pair on the top line with Moritz Seider. We didn't just put him there just to put him there because we didn't have any other option. I'm assuming Lalone and Steve Yzerman probably had a talk saying, like, we have to give this kid a shot just to see what he's got. And he's got it. He's got the stuff. And I would not be upset. I'm going back to what I said that I don't think I would be upset with a 4x4 anymore. However, the age does scare me. And I think I would much rather be more comfortable with either giving him a 2 or a 3 year deal where it's not a prove it deal, but it's kind of almost the same situation as P.S. Suter, right? Where P.S. Suter only had the 1 to 2 years of showcasing what he can do in the NHL, and then Chicago just didn't want to re-sign him because you don't know what you're going to get after this. So that does come playing in my mind is that I don't know where Jake Wallman could be, but I do know that we have someone that can be a really good fit with Moritz Seider, and I'm willing to give him that 2 to 3 year deal. And then after that, if he continues doing great, maybe keep on giving him those. But that might be the reason why maybe he is interested in a 4x4. Not saying that this is the rumor or anything, but I can see realistically he's probably going to start asking for that once him and his agent start talking to Yzerman. Yeah, love the guy. Have nothing else to say really but good things. So
Yeah, he's been very good. I think his defensive game We haven't got a big sample size of it before he was in Detroit. I think it's been very solid. Um, I think a little bit of that also has to do with the fact that he's playing with Sider. So naturally, when you play with a defenseman who is that talented, your numbers are going to go up a little bit. That being said, with his increased, I guess, defensive acumen is the best way to say it, you don't really have to pay him too much. I would pay him 4x4 just because you want to get him for a little while because he's a very reliable partner for Mo Sider. And for Mo Sider's career in Detroit, you're going to want him to play with guys who he has very good chemistry with and he trusts in the defensive zone so he can go out and lay the big hits, put up points. Of course, he's a very good defenseman too, so he's good in the defensive zone. Yeah, I think his game complements Sider's very well, and for that reason, I would want to see him re-signed.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm right there with you. Yeah, I think it's probably the smartest decision to re-sign him. And, if the contract doesn't work out down the road, then, at least you probably got him on a cheap deal. But
It'll be cheap no matter
we hope
what
that
it
it all
is.
pans out at the end. But the next player, let's go ahead and talk about, and this one can be really quick. It's going to be Moritz Seider. I mean, this guy, what?
Yeah, so we're running a little long. I wouldn't mind if we just do the whole season as a whole after this. We don't spend too much time on him. I mean,
Yeah,
he's God. He's a franchise defenseman. He's going to be in Detroit for a very long time, and I would not be shocked if he wins a Norris or two. I mean, he's everything you want in a defenseman. He's big, physical, puts up points, literally murders people with hits. I mean, I don't even know how these guys are getting up and skinning away after that. He'll you don't ideally want him to fight, but he will go and get chippy with pretty much anyone on the ice. I remember, I think it was literally his first NHL game, at least very early in his career. He literally, the first thing he did was when he fought Austin Matthews. So you love seeing that out of your young defenseman, that he's not afraid to get scrappy. But no, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't think it's crazy to say that he's going to develop into like a Victor Hedman type player, maybe a Roman Yossi type player. I love the kid. I love him. I love him. I love him. For my birthday, I am going to ask for a Mo Sider jersey. I love him that much.
yeah. I mean, I have nothing but great things to say about the kid. I don't think that there's definitely some plays where he has those occasional screw ups, but that comes
But
with
that's any
being
defenseman. I mean,
defensive.
Kel
Yeah,
McCarr has screw
no,
ups. Victor Hedman has screw ups. It happens. It just happens. You know.
yeah, 100%. So, I mean, going off of that, though, yeah, I have nothing but great things to say about Moritz Seider. I think that there is a reality to say that if and when Larkin isn't on this team, that he could be considered as the next captain, considering that he has captained the German national team. Um, just all around, just sounds like a good guy. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. He's really smart. Um, yeah, I just have some really high hopes for this guy that he could be basically our next Lidstrom light or whatever you want to consider him. But I'm not trying to place a comparable on him because that's unfair.
I
But
wouldn't go so that. I wouldn't go that far.
but
I'd say Hedman is probably a pretty good comparison.
I'm not even doing it for a comparable sake. I'm just doing it as in like this is the player that we've been waiting for ever since that Lidstrom
That
that we
yeah,
had. You know
it
what I mean? So
100% is.
like
Yeah.
so we'll kind of end it there with Moritz Seider going in. We'll just go really quick. Jordan Osterley. This is a player that's can go. He can go fall in a ditch or something. He's 30 years old, making $1.35 million. He plays both sides. He's in and out of the roster.
I
Robert
wouldn't be sad if he came back on another year. Just he's a defensive defenseman, stayed home, reliable. It's not the you give him another mill, give him another year, whatever. It's very low risk.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he could be the seventh or eighth defenseman all day long. I don't
Yeah.
care. That's cool with me. Same thing with Robert Hagg. I mean, that's probably a guy that I just wouldn't resign because we just signed
No,
him
definitely not.
because we only signed him because Mark Pissick got injured at the start
Mm-hmm.
of the year because of his Achilles. So yeah, Robert Hagg can go. And then the last player would be Gustav Lindstrom, who it's kind of the same thing for me where, yeah, he's 24 and he's still an RFA, but he just can't seem to figure it out. I don't think that his hockey IQ is quite there.
That's something you can't
He,
teach. You just have to have
he
it.
doesn't. It's not that he doesn't look out of place. It's just that yeah, he doesn't really make the smartest decisions when he is under pressure from what I've noticed. So that for that, I think I'm out in that regard where I think you could just kind of package him up in a deal. Um,
I'm
who needs a
convinced.
right defenseman?
I'm convinced they only drafted Lindstrom because his name sounds like Lidstrom. I mean,
Probably.
I'm not even like that. I don't even think that's a conspiracy theory. Like, I feel like that's literally why they got him. Didn't
And
even
then
look at
Mark
tape
Pissick,
on him.
obviously. Yeah, and then obviously Mark Pissick. We won't talk about
Who
him because
knows?
that's last season. Um, Billy Huso, I mean, yeah, brought in to be the 1A, 1B with Ned. Huso signed the 3-year deal, 4.75 mil. This is the guy who pretty much is the number one goaltender for the Detroit Red Wings this season. Ned is down in AHL, and that's probably where he's going to finish out at, unless I am in the realm where I see a world where we are going to trade Magnus Hellberg, and that's the probably the reason why, not the main reason why, but there's other variables why Ned got shut down. Right? Yes, he wasn't looking very good, and he needed time to play to kind of get back up to speed that we wanted him to. But we also sent him down knowing that no teams were going to claim him because teams were more interested in Hellberg, who comes in at a cheaper hit, who plays pretty much just as good as Ned does right now. So I'm very much a believer that we are in a world where Magnus Hellberg probably gets traded at the deadline. And you get what you can for him at the sheer fact of how many times he was waiver claimed this season so far. So that's, I guess, if you want to call it this, that's my hot take is that I think Magnus Hellberg will get traded. And then you'll bring up Ned when that happens, and you just ride with Huso and Ned again. And then I don't think that you bring Ned back. I think you either try to find another goalie to do the 1A, 1B situation, or I think now is the time at the end of the season, in the off season, if you can, if not trade for one, you have to go out there and get a number one goaltender, one that can play those 50 games, those 60 games for you. That is something that the Red Wings really have not had in a really, really, really long time. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I guess you could trade Hellberg. It doesn't really make much sense to let him walk for nothing. You might as well get something for him. It's not going to be
Right.
more than like a sixth or a seventh round pick, but I mean,
It
whatever.
could be more
It's
than that.
something.
That's a cheap goal. That's a cheap goaltender, man. And I get it that he's like not lights out, but like teams need that depth goaltending. They
Yeah,
really do, especially in the
but
playoffs.
for depth goaltending, you're not going to give up that much. You might give up at most a fifth round pick. You don't need to buy high on depth backup goalies. You just really don't, especially for Hellberg's caliber. Um, and of course Huso. I think he's very good for now. I I think he could be your franchise goalie, but you're really still hoping that'll work out with Kosa, which that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
other discussion. Kosa has me very worried with how he's doing in Toledo. Um, yeah, it's not looking good there. I didn't really like the pick at the time, and like it even less now. But no, Huso's solid. I do like Huso. It's not a bad idea to go out and see if you can get a free agent goalie in free agency. Although I did take a look at the pending UFAs for goalies, it's very sparse. There's not going to be much there. But whatever, go get one. They're going to be cheap for a backup. Um, I don't think you're going to get a 1A 1B of Huso. I just don't think it's going to happen. So he unfortunately might have to play the majority of games, maybe 50, not necessarily 60, but he could play 50 games and probably be fine with that. Yeah, I like Huso as a goalie. I hope he's short term and Kosa can take over, but there's just so many question marks there. I can't even really tell you what's going to happen with that.
And I think that really just about wraps it up. And
Mm-hmm.
there's another player that we missed, and I don't think it's really fair to talk about him either, is Jacob Verana. So we'll just kind of leave that out.
I do want to mention he's been scoring. He's been scoring recently. I wouldn't
That
be
is true.
surprised if he can keep it up. We'll see him after the deadline. Like a couple weeks ago, whenever he got sent down on waivers, I was very, very nervous about this. I was thinking, well, he's done in Detroit and maybe the NHL in general. He's been scoring though, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's looking a lot better than it did a few weeks ago.
No, 100%. Yeah, and that's good to see. We want to see him scoring. We want to see him getting back up to pace. And we still lack questions that have to be answered, but we'll probably never get those answers, and that's quite all
No, we
right
won't.
because
I don't think we will. I'm not
yeah,
asking
that's
for it either.
right. Yeah. So let's go ahead and just discuss our overall team grade for the midway point. I mean, this is a team that had some expectations going into the season where me personally, I'll at least talk on behalf of myself, where I knew this team was going to be better than last season. How much better? I wasn't sure because I had told myself that you have to remember that injuries do happen where this whole entire team on paper is not going to stay healthy the whole entire season. And it didn't, and other factors played a role into that too that no one would have guessed. So, am I disappointed in the team? No. Am I happy where they're at? Yeah, I would say to an extent. But overall, I think I would probably give this team a C, maybe a C plus. Um, Ned let me down. The Bertuzzi injuries, granted, those weren't his fault. That really hurt. Vrana being out, that's really not his fault either. That really hurt as well. Um, and then the whole Sherrod signing, and you know, some players weren't taking the steps that we thought that they were, and there are other players that have been doing really great. Johnny Burgers, I know that's not a player that we touched on, but he's technically not on the roster right now. But I'm sure our end of the year report, our gradings, we'll talk about him. I'm sure he'll be up after the trade deadline. So, yeah, I think that's what I'm going to give him for the midway point, and that's what I'm giving him right now in hopes that they can change my mind at the end of the year. Having a healthy roster and keeping those players healthy and maybe slightly getting to a better spot, aiming towards a wild card. Am I expecting that? No. But would I like to see that push? Yes. I want to see them push because that's what we want. We want to see individual progress. And I know that sounds weird for hockey and it's very much a team sport, but being a rebuilding team still, that's what you have to look forward to. Is that how much can these players individually grow themselves, not just production, but overall, just as a player. So that's where I'm at. CC plus.
Yeah, so right now they're at 50 points as a team. Give me a sec. I gotta check the standings and see exactly where they are. They are,
They're like 10th to the last.
yeah. So they're sixth in the Atlantic Division. They're on pace for 86 points, which will be about 10 points better than last season. Um, I think overall, this season has had rough patches, which this team is still very young, and let's just face it, not as talented as they need to be. So that's to be expected. Um, I still think overall, you could still call this season a success, even though we're not expecting them to make the playoffs, which I think some people were hoping that was going to happen. I didn't see that happening, but a lot of new players, a lot of key players out, new coach, new system. There's a lot of growing pains of this team. I think if you were to judge them just based on this year, it would probably be a little unfair. I mean, it's like Lalonde and Iserman said, there's a process here, and it takes time. You need to be patient and let it play out naturally at its own speed. Um, I'm not too far off on your overall grade. I'd put it more towards a B minus. I think if we had Bertuzzi healthy, if we had Verona playing, that's a lot of goal scoring talent that we're missing. And hell, even if Zadina was healthy, you never know what he could do with a full
Yeah.
season and staying healthy. If we had those key players in, we might be talking about them just outside of a wild card spot, like at least on the outside looking in for the playoffs. It would be a whole different year. So, yeah, pretty much everything that can go wrong has gone wrong this season, unfortunately. We've had a lot of surprising players in Mata, Hronek, who am I thinking forgetting? Kubalik has been very surprising. Sherrod has been surprising with how bad he is, but I don't really want to give any negativity right now with my overall grade. Yeah, overall, I'm happy with the season. I could be happier, but on the happiness meter, I'm at like a 6 out of 10, I guess. They made the most of what they had, in my opinion, and that's really all you can ask for at times. I would expect next year that they're really going to take a step forward and try and get in the playoffs. This season it was kind of a pipe dream, to be honest. And really, if there's a season where they're going to kind of flounder a little bit and lose more games and win, it's going to be this season. Let's be honest. I would say at this point, I as much as I hate rooting for my team to lose, and I've unfortunately been doing that with this team for the past 5 or 6 years, I'm gonna have to do it again this year, just because the prize, the potential prize at the end of the road is just so attractive. If they can win this lottery, which we know they won't, but if they can do it and they get Bedard, congrats guys, the rebuild's over. You did it. Now let's go to the playoffs. I mean, it's literally going to be that much of a night and day shift that they can get this guy. But that's a conversation for another time. We've already gone long enough, so I think
It's
we can
funny
call
that
it
you
there.
it's funny that you said that you gave him a B minus, but you gave him a 6 out of 10. What university did you go to that gave you a B minus when you got a 6 out of 10, buddy?
No. That was my happiness scale. They're both scaled differently.
Okay,
There's different
okay,
there's different metrics there. All right.
for sure.
We
Okay,
use
my
different
mistake.
metrics on the team grades and the happiness scale.
For
So
sure. Okay. My
yeah,
apologies. All right, all right. I apologize. I apologize. My bad. Happiness scale. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I got nothing else to say. Leslie, nothing else.
nothing else. Thank you for joining us for another episode, and we will talk with you later. Good night,
See you,
everyone.
everyone.